I went to E3 for the first time ever this year and played a stupid amount of games and met some swell folks in and around the industry. I also destroyed my shoes and spent entirely too long in lines, but it was a trip. I wasn't able to hit every game there, either due to time constraints or, well, lack of interest, but let's get into the ones I was able to play and have something to say about. Dead Rising was one of the first Xbox 360 games to really make me notice the console, and I wasn't alone. The sheer number of zombies on screen at once with the ensuing madness drew people into checking out the 360. Dead Rising 4 sees the return of Frank West with more zombie killing and even more outlandish weapons. Frank can get this giant mech suit and pick up objects he normally can't to bash the crap out of hordes of undead. Plus, there's the return of photography and, altogether, just the madness that the series is known for. Notably, the game did chug a few times while playing, and the series' awful load times looks like it'll be sticking around, along with the clunky movement, which is still there, but I'm looking forward to Frank West's return in December. Square Enix is making a huge push with Final Fantasy XV, with a marketing blitz that's unheard of for the series. I played through the other demos that were available to the public prior to E3, and both got me pretty hyped for the game. The scale that Square Enix has gone to create this vast world that blends the old with the new could reclaim the status it once had with 7. So here comes E3 with what is essentially a single boss battle and a lot of quick time events and really just a bunch of button pressing. Oh. While I'm still looking forward to 15, what I played at E3 was pretty underwhelming. Anytime I screwed up a block or a parry against the boss, I'd take damage and go flying, but at no point did it seem like I was ever in real danger, just a lot of spectacle. There were a few grunts before the boss to mow down, and those were much more fun than the main chunk available. Hopefully the finished game adds more to these fights, or else I'm afraid the whole experience may be boring to play. If you're a fan of Ace Attorney, you'll know how stupid you sound when you try to explain the series, and if you aren't, you probably know how stupid it sounds on paper. That being said, the 6th game in the series, Spirit of Justice, continues the quality that it's known for. Since Phoenix and his friends are in Maya's home country in this game, the court system relies on spirit mediums in their trials. From there, a new mechanic is introduced that shows the victim's last moments before death, which is submitted to the court as evidence. Players have to point out the contradictions in these visions to prove their client's innocence, and that's harder than ever before. For some reason, everyone in this country hates lawyers, making Phoenix the least popular guy around. Being a big fan of this series, I can't wait to find out why later this year. Wild Guns is a Super Nintendo gem that seemed to be almost forgotten to time until Natsume announced the game was coming back exclusively to the PlayStation 4. Wild Guns Reloaded brings widescreen and 4-player co-op into the mix, while keeping the same sound, visuals, and gameplay as the original. Nothing else has changed, meaning Reloaded is just as hard as the original. While 4 players is fun, the insanity ramps up quickly and bullets get lost in explosions and carnage that ensues. In the most basic terms, Reloaded's multiplayer is like the new Super Mario series. Don't expect to get far if you load up with all 4 players. Shantae has always been a fantastic series, and Half Genie Hero will be no exception. This time around, WayForward has upped the series' production value thanks to their Kickstarter, and Shantae, along with the other characters, are all hand-drawn sprites that look tremendous. The platforming is as solid as ever, very easy to pick up and play. Shantae has several different transformations that thankfully are regulated to a quick change menu instead of having to wait at all. The only detriment I can see this game having off the bat is the backgrounds are fairly basic, similar to the DuckTales Remastered game from 3 years ago. That being said, Half Genie Hero is well on its way to being another standout title from WayForward. Towards the end of the first day, I got to try the PlayStation VR headset along with Psychonauts, Rhombus of Ruin. Rhombus of Ruin plays similar to an adventure puzzle game like Myst, wherein players are looking around the cabin of a plane and messing with different objects and characters. It's crazy to think that Psychonauts is over 10 years old, especially since Rhombus of Ruin bridges the first and the upcoming second game without feeling like time has passed at all. There was a lot of charm to the short demo, and playing around with the powers felt new all over again. And while Rhombus of Ruin was really fun to play around in, I'm not sure I can see an entire game built around it, or really any game built around VR for that matter. Having headphones is a must, as it ups the immersion factor tenfold, and without them, I would think other sounds would be pretty disorienting. I'm not sure I'd want to play with an entire game strapped to my face. It also doesn't help that every VR headset is expensive right now, with the PlayStation VR being the cheapest option when it launches in the fall for $400. Also, it should be noted that the VR requires the use of the PlayStation camera, and with a big ass projector taking up all my wall space, I don't really have room for it. Whoops. Cuphead is one of those games I keep forgetting that is in development, and I don't have a good excuse as to why. The entire game is made with some gorgeous animation that harkens back to the early days of Mickey Mouse cartoons from Disney. Honestly, I could go about the art for days, as it's really fluid and imaginative without a single frame looking out of place. But don't let the cutesy aesthetic fool you. Cuphead is as tough as nails and unforgiving. Playing with 2 players is chaotic, and it's very easy to lose track of bullets whizzing past your character if you aren't careful. I was surprised actually by how easy it was to die, and how crushing it is when the results screen shows the progress you've made. Cuphead was made for gamers who loved Metal Slug or Contra, and I can't wait to get my hands on the finished copy. Here's hoping no one smashes any controllers when it debuts. Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric was a disaster, simply put, and the 3DS cousin Shattered Crystal wasn't a whole lot better. While Sonic Retro is the reason why I was able to make it out to E3 this year, I didn't have very high hopes for Fire and Ice. Surprise, it's not a bad game. Yeah, in fact, I'd say it's pretty fun. This time around, Sonic and friends manipulate the powers of the thermostat to progress through levels. The switching between ice and fire powers reminded me a lot of Mighty Switch Force, and the levels themselves are just the right size while promoting multiple playthroughs with options to explore and plenty of secrets to collect. There's a lot of variety in the gameplay, the best being the Worm Tunnel levels that play a lot like modern Sonic games, Generations, Colors, and Unleashed. Fire and Ice isn't perfect. It's perplexing to have a run button in a Sonic game again, and while switching characters is quick and they mostly function the same, the level design feels like they didn't want you to use one character the whole time and wanted to force a change. Still, Fire and Ice looks like it'll be the one good game to come out of Sonic Boom, even if the bar's set really, really low. I think it says a lot that Capcom has enough new content coming to Street Fighter V that it warranted its own fairly large section at their booth. The biggest addition, of course, is the story mode that will be released at the end of the month. I'm terrible at fighting games, but having a narrative tie everything together is a strangely satisfying way to keep players engaged. If you lose a fight in story mode, the game doesn't give you the option to retry. Instead, the story progresses from this loss, which could potentially offer a lot of replay value, not unlike No Mercy for the Nintendo 64. Yeah, I know, I'm reaching kind of far with that one. The character animations and voiceovers are very well done and use the in-game engine to create them, meaning each scene to fight is blended really well. Street Fighter V has had, and still does, the potential to be incredible. Obviously, the launch was rocky, but if these additions can make the cut quick enough, Street Fighter V could easily be back on everybody's radar. Bloodstained is another one of those Kickstarter games that was backed on promises alone and no real tangible game to be had. While other games may promise to play like those that came before it, Bloodstained could easily pass for one of the Metroidvania titles without a second thought, right down to the enemy design. Killing enemies and leveling up is satisfying and quick, and exploring the level was fun, yet not the least bit disorienting. Let's just hope this game doesn't get a god-awful launch trailer like a certain other title did. Here's the thing about E3. You stand in lines. A lot. It's not unlike Disneyland where you spend more time standing and waiting than you do actually having fun. The difference is, Disneyland lines are nearly guaranteed to be fun. E3 demos aren't. ReCore is one of those games. Now before I get started, I think the demo I was playing may have bugged out. I wasn't about to wait another 2 hours to find out, but that's worth pointing out. ReCore has some good ideas, being that it attempts to play like a fast-paced shooter mixed with the similar color-changing elements to Ikaruga, only to do damage instead of dodge attacks. Players switch between colors based on what they're shooting to deal out more damage, and this part works pretty well. Shooting and strafing is easy to do, and the lock-on system allows you to worry more about dodging than hitting your mark. It's the extra things with ReCore that drug the experience down, like opening a door. There's at least 2 parts in the demo where players have to use a grappling hook to yank down a door. The first time, I barely got it to work. The second, my button inputs just weren't registering. I'm not sure why this one task was so hard to do, but no matter how much I followed the prompt, it just wasn't happening. Couple that with a dash mechanic that you need to cross gaps but wasn't explained in-game and wasn't on the controller explanation sheet, and you've got the perfect storm for an underwhelming and frustrating mess. But waiting in line isn't always the worst thing. In fact, sometimes it's completely worth it. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was a gamble for Nintendo that paid off as far as media buzz is concerned. Zelda has been completely revamped. It's no longer simply go to point A and point B. You're on a huge adventure. Weapons have to be acquired and pilfered from enemies, which do eventually wear down and break. Combat has also been redone. You'll use the new jump button to dodge attacks and parry, while combining your bow, sword, or any other weapon you acquire. Stamina allows Link to run short distances, but it also shows how long Link can hold on while climbing before falling, or swim before drowning. Tasks before that seemed so arbitrary suddenly have weight and require players to step back and assess the situation. Even the most mundane of tasks no longer let players go into autopilot. You have to think. Breath of the Wild's demo was huge, clocking in at 35 minutes between two demos, with the first solely being about exploring Hyrule. At one point I looked around me and every single screen was doing something different. The map we were given is roughly 5 to 10% of the overall map of the final game, and I can't emphasize enough how much there was to do in that space alone. Breath of the Wild is stunning, with Hyrule sprawling before you as far as the eye can see, and the score is chillingly perfect. The moment Link ran out of the cave in the beginning of the story demo to the land spreading out before him was when I realized how special this game is going to be. Not much is known about the story at this point, even in the demo that I played, but there's enough to hook players into wanting more. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was the best game I played at E3 2016. It was the game that made me grin like an idiot and remember why I'd wanted to come out to Los Angeles in the first place. So much so that I waited through that crazy line twice. Breath of the Wild is a game that lets players tackle situations in any way they see fit, and I can easily see folks coming back to it again and again. Sadly, it doesn't come out until next year, but if there's even the slightest amount of upgrade between the Wii U version and the NX, then Nintendo's already made a sale out of me. E3 2016 was something else. It was an experience I'll never forget, and I met some amazing folks out there. As I was typing this script out, I could barely walk because my feet were torn to shreds, my sleep schedule was way out of whack, and I know I looked like hell. So would I do it again? You'd better absolutely, positively believe that maybe I would, yeah.